Today, President Yoon departs for Lithuania for his second NATO summit. A sit-down with the Japanese PM is also scheduled, possibly to discuss Japan's Fukushima wastewater release. The Fukushima wastewater issue was fiercely debated over the weekend during the head of the IAEA's visit to Seoul, with the opposition party calling for postponement as the IAEA chief once again backs up the plan. In Beijing, the U.S. Treasury Secretary wraps up her visit, making assurances that Washington does not want to decouple with China, but will continue to de-risk in trade. Good afternoon. In the coming hours, President Yoon will depart for Lithuania to attend his second NATO summit. A series of bilateral summits will be held on the sidelines, including one with the Japanese Prime Minister, where Japan's planned release of Fukushima wastewater will likely be addressed. Our presidential office correspondent Kim Do-yeon has the details.
President Yoon makes a return to a NATO summit this week as he looks to bolster two-way cooperation between the 31-member alliance and the Indo-Pacific region, with the war in Ukraine high on the agenda. This is Yoon's second appearance at the multilateral summit after participating last year in what was a first for a South Korean president.
The president will lay out South Korea's contribution to peace in Ukraine, one of the most important issues for the international community, and will concretely set forth our global responsibility diplomacy.
According to an official at the top office, Seoul and NATO will adapt a new document to institutionalize cooperation in 11 areas, including non-proliferation, cybersecurity, and emerging technologies. Yoon will also meet with NATO Secretary General on Tuesday and has at least 10 confirmed sideline bilateral meetings arranged through Wednesday. This includes one with his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida, which is highly anticipated considering the recent release of an IAEA report saying Japan's plan to release Fukushima nuclear wastewater into the Pacific meets international standards. A top office official said the two leaders will likely discuss the matter as it's an important issue for the region, but Seoul's position remains unchanged, putting people's health as the utmost priority. Yoon will also moderate a four-way summit with the Asia-Pacific 4 nations, including Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. This also comes as South Korea formally opened a permanent mission to the organization in Belgium last November. South Korea and NATO officially formed a partnership in 2006 based on shared values of freedom and democracy, but have sped up cooperation recently with uncertainties across the globe. And the two see mutual benefit from the partnership.
We are, of course, concerned about the reckless missile tests and the nuclear programs of North Korea, and the war in Ukraine has also ramifications for your region. And we also know that North Korea is providing military support to the Russian war efforts with rockets and missiles, and this just highlights how we are interconnected.
In the meantime, Yoon will have one eye on China's reaction to his NATO appearance as the superpower slammed the president's previous summit involvement, pointing to a NATO strategic concept from 2022 that puts pressure on China by saying the alliance faces, quote, systematic competition from Beijing. However, the South Korean government has not budged from its stance that its diplomatic activity does not exclude any particular state. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Ahead of the NATO summit, President Yoon said it is time for the international community to show its will to stop North Korea's nuclear weapons development is greater than North Korea's motivation to produce such weapons. The president made the comments in a written interview with the Associated Press published on Monday. Yoon is expected to use the summit to highlight North Korea-related issues, including the regime's, quote, illegal activities. He also called for peace through force and deterrence and said sanctions on North Korea prevent the advancement of its nuclear and missile capabilities. On the war in Ukraine, he said what happens in Europe can have a huge impact in the Indo-Pacific and vice versa, and pledged continued support for Ukraine in line with Seoul's and international community's standards. Front and center at the NATO Summit will likely be Ukraine's membership as well as Sweden's. However, President Joe Biden said it is not the time for Ukraine to join the alliance as the country is still in the middle of a war. Lee Seung-jae tells us more.
Speaking to CNN in an exclusive interview which aired on Sunday, U.S. President Joe Biden says Ukraine is not ready for NATO membership, adding that Russia's war against Ukraine must end before they can be considered. Biden says that there's no clear-cut consensus on Ukraine joining NATO, as it's still in the middle of a war. He says if Ukraine were to join NATO during the war, it would mean NATO being at war with Russia, hinting that such a scenario would complicate things further. The U.S. president said although Ukraine is not ready for membership into the military alliance, the country would be provided security and weaponry. Biden said he believes that over time, NATO would lay out a rational path for Ukraine to be able to qualify to be able to get into NATO, stressing that he had refused Russian President Vladimir Putin's demands to not let Ukraine in, as the alliance has an open-door policy. The comments came ahead of Biden's week-long trip to Europe, which includes the NATO Summit in Lithuania. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky echoed Biden's remarks, saying that Ukraine will prepare for NATO membership after the war. Ahead of the NATO summit, the Ukrainian leader says while he doesn't expect his country to be given the green light until after the war, he hopes the gathering in Lithuania will give a clear signal on the intention to bring Ukraine into the alliance. Also in an interview with ABC News, Zelensky said Ukraine will also prepare for European Union membership after the war with Russia ends. Zelensky noted that 90% of Ukrainians want NATO membership, while more than 90% want to join the EU. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
North Korea has accused the U.S. of violating its airspace with spy planes and has threatened to shoot down such aircraft. The claims were made by the regime's Korean Central News Agency on Monday, in which a North Korean Defense Ministry spokesperson pointed the finger at U.S. aircraft, specifically the RC-135, the U-2S, and RQ-4 Global Hawk, for allegedly flying into its airspace. The North warned that there will be a price to pay for these supposed American espionage acts. However, these allegations were dismissed by South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff, who on Monday's morning denied any American intrusion into North Korean airspace. After his trip to Japan, the head of the IAEA visited South Korea over the weekend to explain the agency's recent report backing Japan's plan to discharge Fukushima wastewater. His visit prompted a fierce clash with the country's opposition party that's strongly against the plan. Our political correspondent Lee Si-hoo reports.
The main opposition Democratic Party on Sunday heavily criticized the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency over the UN nuclear watchdog's recent report on the issue of Fukushima wastewater. This is during the IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi's three-day visit to Seoul.
Coming to an early conclusion without properly studying the impact of the discharge on neighboring countries like this makes this a self-check customized for Japan.
The party further claimed that the report did not check the performance of the advanced liquid processing system, nor did it review the long-term effects of the discharge on the marine ecosystem. It further asked for the postponement of the discharge. Grossi reiterated the report's conclusion.
Our conclusion has been that this plan, if it is carried out in the way it has been presented, would be in line, would be in conformity with the international safety standards.
To which the DP replied,
There exists an international standard for coolant released from a normal nuclear power plant, but there's no such international standard for discharging nuclear waste.
The ruling People Power Party, on the other hand, urged the opposition to stop what it called non-scientific agitation.
This global shame is a disaster caused by the DP's false myths. How much further will the DP debase South Korea's national dignity?
The PPP says it is coming up with ways to safeguard the fishing industry, while 11 DP and independent lawmakers are traveling to Japan to hold public protests. It's expected that the ruling and opposition parties will continue to clash on the issue as the parliament's extraordinary session restarts on the 10th. Grossi also met with the head of South Korea's Nuclear Safety and Security Commission, Yoo Yoo reportedly asked for the continued participation of South Korean experts in the IAEA's future review process, and Grossi responded that he will look for ways to make this happen. According to South Korea's Foreign Ministry, Foreign Minister Park Jin also met with Grossi and asked for the agency's active cooperation in ensuring safety and reassuring the public. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
Now over in Beijing, where U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has wrapped up her visit. Yellen once again stressed that Washington does not want to decouple with China, saying it will be disastrous for both countries, but the U.S. will continue to de-risk in trade. Yoon reports.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen concluded her 4-day visit to Beijing for high-level talks on Sunday as Washington seeks to stabilize relations with China after months of inflamed tensions. Relations between the two countries have been particularly frosty in recent times amid national security issues, including Taiwan, U.S. imposing export bans on advanced technologies, as well as the U.S.'s apparent rallying of advanced economies to counter China's economic coercion. But during her visit to Beijing, Yellen reiterated that the United States is not seeking to decouple from China.
There is an important distinction between decoupling on the one hand and, on the other hand, diversifying critical supply chains or taking targeted national security actions.
She added that such a decoupling would be disastrous for both countries and destabilizing for the world, and that the world is big enough for both of the world's two largest economies to thrive.
We want a dynamic and healthy global economy that is open, free, and fair, not one that is fragmented or forces countries to take sides.
While a single visit is not enough to solve the challenges overnight, Yellen highlighted that the bilateral meetings served as a step forward in efforts to put the U.S.-China relationship on surer footing. The two countries remain at odds on numerous issues, and this trip did not result in any specific policy breakthroughs. But Yellen summarized her trip as successful in terms of reestablishing contact, saying she expected increased and more regular communications at a staff level. Such connections are expected to reduce the risk of misunderstanding and pave the way for cooperation in areas such as climate change and debt distress. Later this month, U.S. climate envoy John Kerry is scheduled to make a visit to China as the U.S. diplomatic push continues, ahead of a possible meeting between the country's leaders at September's G20 summit in New Delhi or an APEC gathering scheduled for November in San Francisco. Yoon, Arirang News.
Nationwide rain returns to South Korea with central and southern regions to see torrential downpours. Frequent rain is in the forecast for the whole week. Shin Se-byung reports.
A low-pressure system is bringing widespread rain to South Korea on Monday. This has triggered heavy rain alerts in most parts of the central region as well as Jeollanam-do province. Those regions are forecast to see torrential rainfall of 30 to 60 millimeters per hour. The southern part of Gyeonggi-do province and parts of Gangneung and Chungcheong-do provinces will see more than 100 millimeters on Monday. The central region and Jeju-do Island will receive 20 to 80 millimeters of rain. The Korea Meteorological Administration explains that repeated showers are being caused by an atmospheric trough passing over the Korean peninsula. The KMA advises the public to exercise caution as the rain will be accompanied by strong winds, thunder, and lightning. Also, with the ongoing heavy rainfall, the ground could become weak, posing a risk of flooding, landslides, and collapses at construction sites. The Weather Authority has also asked people to be aware of any potential safety issues that could lead to accidents. Hot weather will persist during the daytime on Monday. Heatwave alerts are in effect for a wide range of areas south of the capital and Gangneung province. Feels like temperatures in those areas will soar to around 33 degrees Celsius during the day. And South Korea will continue to be heavily influenced by the monsoon front. Frequent rain will soak the entire nation throughout the week. Starting Wednesday in particular, a stationary front will bring heavy rainfall to the central regions. The front will remain stalled over the peninsula, with rain in the forecast every day from then until next Monday. 신새벽, Arirang News.
South Korean midfielder Kang-in has signed a 5-year deal with French powerhouse Paris Saint-Germain, making him the first South Korean to join the French side. The announcement was made Sunday on the PSG website. The 22-year-old has spent his entire career up to now in Spain, most recently playing with the RCD Mallorca, where he contributed with 6 goals and 7 assists for the Spanish side last season. He could now see himself lining up alongside the likes of Kylian Mbappe and Neymar in a team that has won 9 out of the last 11 league titles. Action film The Roundup No Way Out recently surpassed 10 million viewers, helping its The Outlaws series to set a new record for the Korean movie industry. Movie distributor ABO Entertainment announced on Sunday that is, that the total number of audience members of the movie series has now exceeded 30 million. It is the first time a South Korean movie series has reached that milestone. The Roundup No Way Out is the 3rd film in the series, which started with 2017 hit film The Outlaws. It stars Ma Dong-seok as a detective with incredible strength who tries to take down drug cartel in Seoul. South Korea's eastern coastal city of Gangneung is currently hosting the World Choir Games. Dubbed the Choir Olympics, the event is spreading joy and message through melodies. Our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin has the highlights.
The Choir Olympics have come to South Korea's east coast city of Gangneung. Around 8,000 participants from 324 choirs representing over 30 countries are taking part in this year's World Choir Games. While it's a contest, the atmosphere feels more like a festival. Here, there are choirs, each with their own unique charms. Among them is the Calling Choir from Korea, who rose to stardom last year after earning a 4th-place finish at a Korean broadcaster's choir audition show.
When most people think of choirs, they tend to imagine serene and classical music. We wanted to break this stereotype and prove that a choir can perform in any genre. We developed our own style, fusing hip-hop and pop with popping, locking, and walking.
And it's not just about competing. The World Choir Games are also about sharing the joys of singing. So throughout the event, choirs from all around the world are holding free concerts across the city, like here at Gyeongpo Beach. The lineup includes some of the really talented, like the Diocesan School Old Boys Association Choir from Hong Kong.
We search very hard for our choir sound, a very distinct character, the sound of this choir. And then we try to continue to build, look for new exchange opportunities. We try to commission new work to keep ourselves fresh.
And there are those who embody the game's theme of peace and prosperity for all. The Young People's Chorus of New York City is comprised of 2,000 choristers ranging from 8 to 18 years old.
Community is about bringing people together, learning from each other, knowing that one song with many voices can bring peace and love.
There is also the Wagner Choir from Ukraine. Due to the ongoing war, the 30-member choir had to take a 16-hour bus ride to Poland to catch a flight to Korea.
Yes, our message that we want the world to know that our country is in pain right now, but there is always a hope about peace.
Singing has become a part of our lives. It gives us hope and faith that things will get better.
The World Choir Games reminds us that music is a universal language that unites the world, transcending borders and cultures. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News, Gangneung.
South Korea and a number of African nations have signed agreements to boost rice production and address food security issues. On Monday, the government and ministers from 8 African countries signed MOUs to build rice production facilities and share South Korean agricultural machinery in an effort to bolster Africa's rice supply. The so-called K-Rice Belt project aims to produce 10,000 tons of rice seeds that fit local conditions each year starting in 2027 for the 8 African nations. President Yoon made the plans to help Africa reduce its dependence on rice imports during the G7 summit in Hiroshima in May.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In France, the government has banned the sale, possession and transport of all fireworks, with an exception for official fireworks displays run by local authorities. Announced Sunday, the ban comes ahead of Bastille Day, the National Day of France, which is celebrated annually on July 14th. The ban will be lifted from July 15th onwards. It follows an almost week-long series of violent riots sparked by the police killing of a 17-year-old during a traffic stop in the Paris suburb of Nanterre. Protesters were seen using fireworks as weapons during the riots, which saw buildings and cars set alight, public transport services restricted, and thousands of people arrested. According to France's Prime Minister, Bastille Day will also see an increased security presence, meant to keep celebrations peaceful. Turning over to the United Kingdom, the BBC suspended a male TV presenter on Sunday after allegations of sexual misconduct. According to claims, the unnamed presenter paid the victim large sums of money to send sexually explicit photos when they were just 17 years old. The victim reportedly used the money to fund a crack cocaine habit. The victim's family lodged a complaint with the BBC in May, but the presenter was not taken off air at the time. The family then went to UK tabloid newspaper The Sun, which first reported the story on Friday. The BBC says it is investigating the matter, but concerns have been raised over the broadcaster's complaints process, as it has been criticized for not correctly handling the case since the start. Latvia has sworn in the first openly gay president in the European Union. Edgars Rinkevics, formerly the country's foreign minister, was elevated to the position on Saturday. Although it's a largely ceremonial role, as Latvia is predominantly run by a prime minister, Rinkevics can veto legislation and call referendums. Gay marriage is illegal in Latvia, but the country's constitutional court last year recognized same-sex unions. The EU has had openly gay heads of government before, but the 49-year-old is the first openly gay head of state. And finally, hundreds of divers and snorkelers on Saturday attended an underwater concert in the Florida Keys, meant to promote coral reef protection and eco-conscious diving. Called the Lower Keys Underwater Music Festival, the 4-hour event saw participants listen to water-themed music broadcast by a local radio station. Among the tracks were the Beatles' Yellow Submarine, Jimmy Buffett's Fins, and the Little Mermaid theme song. The playlist also included messages on how to minimize the environmental impact on coral reefs. A number of divers chose to dress for the occasion, with some holding instruments such as guitars and trumpets, while others dressed as mermaids. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. The new week starts off with wild weather again. Central regions and the west coast along Jeollado provinces are getting heavier showers. Jeollado and Gyeongsangdo provinces, where a heavy rain advisory has been issued, could see more than 100 millimeters of heavy rain for the day, with 30 to 60 millimeters an hour of rain to pound down throughout Monday. Meanwhile, heat wave advisories are also in place for most of the southern regions despite the massive rainfall, with the east coast of Gangwon-do and parts of the south having a tropical night overnight. Central regions will see highs in the upper 20s, but down south are seeing highs in the 30s. Hot and humid conditions are expected for most of the southern regions today. And please brace for a wet week. We have frequent rain in the forecast all through the week. A torrential amount of rain will pick up from Wednesday in central areas, so try to keep up to date with the latest weather forecast for your safety. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
Thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of the day.